sure they can hear. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So Parshas Vayetze. So the order is going to be a little bit different than the normal order. So we're going to go a little backwards. We'll start. The first thing that we'll learn is actually even the Toldos. We'll start off with the Parsha to understand a little bit what the Parsha is all about. And a few important players, a few important teachings in the Baal Shem. And from the AriZal that we have to understand. So, B'chlalus, in general, the idea of the Parsha starts with Vayetze Yaakov Be'ersheva, Yaakov's leaving Be'ersheva. So Yaakov is going on a journey. He's leaving a place. It's not only the Vayelech Yaakov L'charan, but he's leaving Be'ersheva. He's leaving a certain perspective, a certain place. Be'ersheva is not just only a space that he's leaving, but Be'ersheva means like the well of satisfaction. He's going from the Be'ersheva, the bear of satisfaction. He's going from a place that he's a Yaakov Ish Tam Yeshiva Halim. He's a place that he's a person sitting and learning in the tents. And now he's going to a place which is called Charan Avshalolim, which means that he's going to a place of like he's descending. This is Yaakov is going down to there's a Yerida, there's a descent of Yaakov from Be'ersheva into a place of Charan. This is what Alter writes in Torah. This is the general idea of the descent of Yaakov to Be'ersheva. From Be'ersheva going into Charan. And where is he going? He's going to a place of darkness. So that's why that he's going to a place because the sun has set. So the whole story of Vayetze actually occurs during the night. The concept occurs during the night. That's why if you look at the end of the end of Parshas Vayetze, it's Baboiker. Everything's the morning, and he's going back to Be'ersheva. He's going back to his father's home. So everything occurs within like a frame, an understanding that this is happening in the night, because Yaakov is going to be connected to that Yaakov Tikkun to Osiris. Yaakov connected to establishing the davening for by night, which means that Yaakov is connected to a type of tefillah, a type of finding of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, finding a connection to Hashem in the place of darkness. That's the general structure. And not only is it a place of darkness, but it's a place of ambiguity or a lack of clarity. And like the Zohar mentions in the beginning of in the Parsha, that there's a difference between a vision, which is Nevuah, which actually happens to Avram and to Yitzchak. Generally, that Hashem appears to them in Vayom Hashem al Avram. Hashem appears to them in some form of Nevuah, some type of clarity, some type of a prophecy, which is a form of clarity, versus Yaakov that experiences this week's Parsha. He's experiencing it through a dream, through a chalom, which the idea of a dream is that it's a little bit more murky. It's not clear. It's a form of Nevuah, but it's certainly a much lower form of Nevuah. Because Ein Chalom b'li Dvar Metelim, Chalom also has Dvar Metelim, things that are nonsense, like even, and from Yaakov having dreams, which is like a form of prophecy, sort of clarity of what's going to happen, everyone starts dreaming, and all the dreams of the Torah actually happen in these parshas. Yaakov opens up this conduit of dreaming, and then Yosef is dreaming, and Pare is dreaming, and everything that's happening now, all the nevuos, all the prophecies that are going to happen till the end of the parsha, till the end of Bereshis, will be in the forms of dreams. So it represents descending in to Chara, and then eventually descending into Mitzrayim. And that's what Klal Yisrael goes into Mitzrayim until Eilich Shlois B'Yisrael Boy Mitzrayim, and Klal Yisrael is into Mitzrayim. And then Hashem appears to Moshe Rabbeinu by the sneh, and then there's already a vision again. So that this whole state represents Hayinu Kachomim. Like that Golus represents a form of a dream state where there's some clarity, some ambiguity, some lack of clarity. You see what you should be doing, you're not sure. Sometimes it makes sense to do this, sometimes it makes sense to do something else. This is the level that he's going into. This is what Yaakov is Vayetze. He's going to the place of Chayshach. When he goes there, so the pasuk, the way the psukim phrase it is Vayikach ma'avnei hamakim. He takes from the Avnei Hamakim, V'yasam Arishaisav, and he places the Avnei Hamakim, he places it around his head, and Vayishkav Shah, and he sleeps there. So the word Vayishkav, so the Zohar, in the Kuna Zohar, the Zohar says that Vayishkav has the letters of Yesh Chav Beis, that in there are the Chav Beis Osis HaTorah. So Vayishkav means that he sleeps in the place where there's the 22 letters of the Aleph Beis. This is Vayishkav. So then when it says in the Pasuk, Vayikach me'avnei hamakim, he takes from the Avnei Hamakim, so Avonim, stones, according to the Sefer Yetzirah, stones represents the Aleph Beis. So Vayikach me'avnei hamakim, he's taking from the stones of the place, he's taking the Aleph Beis, the Tzura, the Tzurufim of the Aleph Beis that are in that place. And Vayishkav V'yasam Arishaisav, and he elevates them to some type of Rosh. But he's taking the stones dafke from Me'avnei Hamakim. He's taking the stones from that place. So if you look at the Toldos, so we're going to skip a few pages. The first page I'll look at is the Toldos. It says Toldos Vayetze, it says Peites, and Vayetze. So here he brings down a Torah that's from the B'Shemaiti Memorial. It's in the left column. Ki Aleph Usay Lufa Shaloylam Tamer V'Gonis. That the Baal Shem says, there's a teaching from the Baal Shem, a Torah from the Baal Shem, that the Aleph, the Ramak asks a Shaila. It's a funny question, but it's an interesting question. How come in the Aleph Beis, the higher Aleph Beis have less numeric value and the lower Aleph Beis have more numeric value? In other words, normally if you think in English, you would say, what's more? What's bigger, 10 or 100? You would think 100 is more than 10, right? You would think that 1,000 is more than 1. But when you count the numbers, Aleph is 1, Beis is 2, and Taf is 400, and Matzapach, like the final letter of Matzapach, is 900. Like the final Tzaddik is 900. So you would think that Aleph, just conceptually, if you're thinking about bigger, you're thinking about something that's bigger, you would think something that's bigger means it has a higher number. Right? That's general. That's what you would think. Bigger means, and if it's something is qualitatively bigger, it's also quantitatively bigger. You would think. This is a question that Ramak asks. It's not like a shaila. It's trying to understand something. So the Ramak answers that the reason why it works like this is because it really works from a singularity, from Ein Sofius, something that's infinite, and the first expression of finitude is like the first nakuda of finitude is only 1. And then the singularity, the 1, multiplies into 2, into 3. So the Aleph Beis actually works like there's something before the Aleph. Before the Aleph, it's actually infinity. The highest level will be the least number. The least number. Yeah. There's also a Torah guy that just remember from the slaving about the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that the reason why the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei are those letters, Yud, Hey, and Vav, is because when you spell them out, they have the least numeric value. So from all the letters of the Aleph Beis, let's say you spell Aleph. So Aleph is Aleph Lamed Pei. That's 111. Beis is Beis Yud Taf. That's 412. Right? Gimel. All the letters are very high numbers. The smallest numeric value of the letters is Yud, Vav, and Hey. So Yud is 20. Vav could be 12. And Hey could be 6. So if you take Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Zayin, Ches, Tes, Yud, you'll follow the numbers, you're talking about much larger numbers. So the smallest numeric value is Yud Kei Vav Kei. So that's the Jewish is right. That's the reason why Yud Kei Vav Kei, because it represents something that's touching infinity. If it's touching infinity, it has the least number. This is similar to what the Ramak writes, that has least number, therefore it's connected to something that's more Ein Sofius. So Aleph starts, and then it moves down into 400 to 900. It means it's further away from the Aleph. The Baal Shem takes this Torah, I don't know if he's writing on the Ramak, but this is an idea what the Ramak is writing, and he writes a little bit even deeper. He writes, Ki Aleph who said Luvashal Olam, the Beis who Beis Alafim. In other words, V'chein Gimel Alfim, Adois Tes Meis Alfim. That means everything is really a multiplication of 1. That Aleph represents the 1, that's the emergence of infinity into the small spark of finitude. Beis is the doubling of Aleph. Gimel is the tripling of Aleph. So really it's the Aleph that keeps on multiplying itself. It's not that it's the reduction of this, it's not that it's the next stage. It's the Aleph itself being expressed a little bit more, right? It's the aleph expanding. The spashas of the aleph, exactly. So yeah, achas v'achas, very good. Achas v'achas sh'tayim, exactly. It's the achas into Shevim. It's always the achas that's expanding into the next one. So it's always the nikud of the aleph. Really, what he's saying is that the higher than aleph is the oir, is the pure light. The first manifestation of that oir is in the aleph, and then the aleph keeps on manifesting until the taf. Again, therefore, the one that's closest to the chayis ruchni, the oir and soif, to the infinite light, is the ois aleph. Okay. So taf will be like the furthest removed from the original oir, right? Because it's the oir and soif, the shoyer and the aleph. Then it comes to the letter taf, which would be the final. The kavana of the tzaddik, who's the shliach of matronisa, the shliach of malchus, the shliach of the queen, is to elevate the oisis la loisem machshava ad machshava al yoina, to elevate them from one place to another place. Ad min makom ad reimer kiyas and tzan shchina shem l'bloshim anal. Shnik is that limud l'shma. That's the limud l'shma. Limud l'shma means you're drawing the oisis back to its original source, into the aleph. Okay, that's what the pasuk said. What does it mean? We took from the stones of that place. He took the letters from the place, which is the Humakayim Shalom. He took from the letters of that place, which is the oil of that place. That mirror shoysav. He's trying to elevate the letters from the Tav. It can go all the way to the Rosh, which will be the Aleph, and then elevate it to the Oyen Sof. Okay, this is the Torah of the Kitzur, the Torah of the Tolas. So the idea is the drawing back of the letters into the original idea. So
is there any specific association with the name of Hashem being Makom here, meaning that?
Yeah, because that's like the spatial thing. I actually want to talk about this right now. In other words, what is dafke vayikach ma'avnei hamakim? So there's the kedusha, the idea of Vayetze Yaakov vayishkav shama, like he doesn't bring mamash from the soil, but it's the same the same idea. That he finds the chafes oisius, which means from that particular space. There's something in that space where he enters, when he's Yetzer Beishavah, Zaviyela Charona, there's something in the place that he's entering into that has a particular type of avonim, a particular type of oisius, that Yaakov's avodah over here is to extricate these sounds, these oisius, and elevate them to the shoyresh, to its root in Kedusha. There's something that is like the teasing out of this type of, in this space, to finding what we'll call, let's say, the Torah in that place. See soon from the Baal Shem. There's something about finding in the place that you're in, to find what is there to bring out. What is there to elevate to the state of Kedusha, to elevate to the state of the Aleph. So, okay, you can keep that page. Just flip it to the other side. No, don't turn it. On the same page. From the Maimon Chekidim, from around the Pana. So let's start off with a general question. There's something, as we say, that Yaakov is trying to, we'll see soon exactly what this means, that Yaakov is trying to find the Kedusha, but not only the Kedusha, but the Torah. He's trying to find the Torah Ma'avnei Hamakim. From the place of Avnei Hamakim, he's trying to find the Chav Beis Oises HaTorah. That's the Lashon Hazor, Asam Deiraisa. He's trying to find the Torah in that place. So there's a general question that we have to ask. So let's say you say from the beginning of history, from the beginning of Adam Rishon until today. Okay, so we're in 6,000 whatever, like 5,000, whatever years, right? So we say there's a period of time. Let's say the full structure will be, let's say, 7,000 years, right? Let's say that's the structure. We'll say that the Torah. Let's pull back and look at it from a high view. You read the Chumash, yeah? So what's the Chumash? Superficially, on a very superficial level, The Chumash is a story. The beginning is the story of the creation of man and how creation came into being. Then it's the chosenness of Avraham Avinu, and then it's the story of a family. And the story continues till Klal Yisrael enters into Mitzrayim, until the Klal Yisrael is about to enter into Eretz Yisrael. Right? So it's a time period of a certain period of time. Let's say for the first 2,500 years of creation, or whatever. There's 2,300, whatever the years of the creation. There's a story that's happening specifically to Avram and to his descendants, and the Torah is describing this event. Now, the question is twofold. Let's try to understand this a little bit. What happens from then? What happened to the history after that? Like, in other words, why is the Torah the story of that particular part of history and no longer? What happens after that? Like after Klal Yisrael enters. Okay, so there's Nevi'im. So let's go even to the end of Nevi'im. What actually happens at that point of time? We're no longer the story of Klal Yisrael is Torah, or is it Torah?
It's the sixth book. No?
What? Yes, I
book.
won't understand this exactly. Let's try and understand it.
But it's solely on Chamisha Chumshei Torah, the whole Tanakh.
What?
Like solely on the 5 books.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the Chumash Chumash Torah.
But it ends kind of like Le'enei Kol Yisrael. It's like sort of like the journey has ended enough to create some subtext for everybody's journey.
Okay, fine, I got that. So why is that Torah? In other words, let's try to understand it. Why is that the Torah? In other words, if the Torah is a lashon ha'ira, it's a lesson, it's a way to it's AriZal Kucher B'Chol Kol Echad, it's part of Hashem's wisdom. Why did it end at this point? Now, what you're saying, I'm not saying is wrong. I'm just saying, what is it about this structure that happens that represents a certain time period, and then it's over, and then our story begins? What is it about this Torah that we study, that we learn, and we say, this is the Torah min hashamayim, this is the Torah that was given? What is it about it? It's, if the Torah only had halachas, the mitzvahs, right? The Torah just told you, this is what you should do, this you shouldn't do. Okay, you say, this is min hashamayim, says these are the mitzvahs you have to do. Okay, I understand. The Torah talks about a story of Avram dealing with Sarah. Okay, Avram dealing with Sarah is one story. So why Avram dealing with Sarah and not Yeshua dealing with Rachav? Why is that not part of the Torah? Like what ended at that point that becomes part of the Torah? Or you dealing with your wife? Why is that not part of the Torah? Or is it? So there's one way to understand the way the Kabbalah understood this is like this. This comes from the Maram Mipano, and it's also brought down. The Shalach Kodesh has a long arichas about this idea. So the Maram Mipano writes like this: that and v'remezes b'shnius b'tachtonim. He says, "Afal b'shar Ramban the Parshas Bereshit loy kosav kain." Even though Ramban doesn't write exactly like that. The Ramban writes that a kosav yidaber b'tachtonim v'yirmez be'el yonim. This is what the Ramban writes in Akdama. That the pasuk is talking about tachtonim. In other words, the Torah is talking about an event that happened in the physical world, and it's alluding to an event that happens on a cosmic spiritual realm. Comes along the Maram Mipano, it says it's not like that. It's fakert. It's actually the opposite. That a Torah medaberes be'etzem bel yonim. In its essence, the Torah is actually talking about something that's talking about on a high spiritual construct, the way it exists on a higher level, and it's only remezes b'tachtonim. And then he says, "Afanon nemer dibra b'nei adam kolosh na Torah." It's not dibra Torah kolosh b'nei adam, which would be the way Chazal phrase it, that the Torah speaks in the language of man, which means it's trying to explain a story that happened with man, and to Maramas, a story that's happening above, some type of spiritual, cosmic, spiritual structure. But really, dibra b'nei adam kolosh na Torah. We're just a reflection of the above. Okay, this is the Torah. The Rebbe writes in Likkutei Sichos that it's not really a contradiction between the Ramban. He tries to reconcile this with the Ramban. But let's just see what the concept means. What does the concept mean? The concept means like this: that Avram is a real person. Yitzchak is a real person. Sarah is a real person. These are real people who really lived, breathed, died, or born and died. But Avram represents Avram's life became so transformed to the place that he's a merkava, that he's a total merkava to chariot, something that's above, that his life becomes now a reflection of something above. Let's say the Sefer HaBor would say that Avram Avinu, that the Mitzvah Chesed complained about Avram, that Avram became Mitzvah Chesed, that there's no Mitzvah Chesed anymore. What does that mean? That Avram embodied this quality so much that if we want to understand what Chesed means, we actually have to look at the story of Avram to understand. And the more we understand in the Pshat level, in the Tachtoinim, what this Midah represents, how Avram lived his life in Tachtoinim, the more we understand of how this structure works in the Elyonim. So it's really the real thing is that Avram becomes like we'll call it like an archetype. Becomes because his life becomes a complete reflection of something that's above. There's a spiritual process. Let's say general speaking. Let's say there's a spiritual process that there's Chesed and there's Gvura and there's Tiferes, and these are all interacting with each other. Okay, so the Chesed and then the Chesed of Klippa and the Gvura of Klippa, right? And they're all interacting with each other. So the Avram and Yitzchak, Yishmael and Esav, they all become representative and embodiments of these qualities. So the Torah is basically saying, if I want to understand what is going on a super cosmic spiritual realm, I understand it through the lives of these people that were living in such a high madrega that their life was a complete reflection of this idea, that they became the embodiment of that idea. Now, then the question is, so why did it end then? So what actually happened? So that you can understand in a mashal, we say that the Rambam brings down that Ma'aseh Avos Simul Labanim. That Ma'aseh Avos Simul Labanim, it's a chazal, but the Ramban writes about this in a great length. That the idea of Ma'aseh Avos Simul Labanim, the actions of our ancestors, is a simon, is an indicator for the children. It's not only just it's an indicator. Ma'aseh Avos Simul Labanim means that creates the story of the banim. Like a simon can mean two things. A simon like if you have a simon on an animal, it's like a rakachavar.
Like a mark.
Yeah, it creates it. In other words, simon could be. I could say that I know that this animal is kosher. Why? Because it chews its cud and it has split hooves. That's one way of looking at the simon. The simon is just an indicator to tell us which animal is kosher. Really, the simon has nothing to do with the kosher. Just you want to know which animal is kosher, so you look at the simon. The simon tells you which is kosher. The rakachavar says no. You can actually learn another way that the simon actually creates the kosher. Right? It's not so. Let's say technically this is a cow, but it doesn't chew its cud and it doesn't split its hooves. You can't eat it, the cow, because the simon creates the kashrus. However, the Ma'aseh Simon Labanim means that it's not only a simon, an indicator. What it is, what? It's a simon. It creates it. So in other words, like this. If you think about this in your own life, there are certain things that you do, certain things that happen to your life. You have to look at it at the story of Klal Yisrael as a story of your own life. Let's say in your own life. There's the most informative years of your life is your youth, is the very early time period of your life. Why? Because in the very early time period of your life, that's when all the wiring happened. Now, this tshuva, it's possible. You can rewire. There's, neuroplasticity. There's like a lot of different things. You can create new wiring. I'm talking about the general hardwiring of who you are as a human being, as a person, has to do with the first few years of your life. And then everything you're living for, God willing, for another 120 years, is living in the effects of that strong hardwiring. Again, you could create tshuva, you could undo things, but the general structure is that it's working this way. This is the way it works in a human being life, in your own particular life. We have to stretch that now and see that within the life of all the Klal Yisrael. That there's the Ma'aseh Avos is like the infancy of who we are as a people. That becomes the Simul Labanim. So the processes that the Avos go through as a Merkava, going through these processes, that creates the reality of what will happen Simul Labanim. So that's why the Rambam will say that the Gullahs of Yaakov going down Mitzrayim is an indicator, is a simon, is exactly how Klal Yisrael will enter into Mitzrayim. You follow? It's not just this happened like this, so this will happen like that. No, it's they created it. That's what we talk about on one level, is that they were a Merkava, and therefore they create it. They create the story, and therefore we are living in the effects. So this, let's pull it back a second. So because they are Merkava, let's go back. Because they are Merkava, which means they are a reflection of, let's say, the state of Katnus. Just to understand this structure. The state of Katnus of the collective. So they reflect that state of Katnus. We're living through the godless of their state of Katnus. So that's like the blueprint. That's why the Torah is, let's say, called is like the blueprint, is the Stakar Raisa Barama. That's the blueprint, which will tell us, okay, this is what happens then. This is what's going to happen here. But this is the main nerve. This is the main source. Everything's just a reflection of what was happening here. You follow? And because they are a Merkava, they're a direct reflection of what's going on at a cosmic level. So in order for, let's say, this week's Parsha, you talk about Kudim, Nikudim, Vrudim, that Yaakov Avinu is creating all different types of stripes and different types of animals. So that AriZal says that Kudim, Nikudim, Vrudim represent three worlds. There's an Akud, where all the lights are Akud, B'Kliecha, they're all represented in one thing. Then Nikudim is Olam HaTorah, where each one is a separate point. And then Vrudim means a stripe, which is Olam HaTikkun, which are all bringing back. So he's saying that this structure, Yaakov Avinu, because he's a Merkava, he's drawing down this, he's embodying this spiritual quality. Now, if we want to understand what Akudim, Nikudim, and Vrudim are, what's the three processes of the Or, Ein Sophius becoming to a place of Tikkun, we can study the story of Yaakov with the Maklas, right? Because he's the Merkava, he's reflecting the above, and we're living the effect of that story. But then the question becomes, what's with these are all positive stories. So Yaakov's a Merkava, Moshe's a Merkava, then Yitzchak Merkava, the Sarah, Rivka, okay, these are Merkavas. What's the story with Lavan? How does Lavan fit into the story? Lavan is a Merkava. Like, how does Lavan fit into the story in terms of being the Merkava? And Lavan is like an alien, and there's a whole Torah about what Lavan represents. So now we're going to read a shtickle Torah from the Baal Shem, on Parshas Vayetze, and we'll see how this moves forward. Reish Samach. So Hashem writes like this. So the pasuk says that Lavan, Yaakov is Vayetze Yaakov Be'eshav L'Charan. He goes to Charan. He lives there. He marries. He builds a family. Okay, this is all the Torah of Golus. We don't understand what the Torah is yet, but this is all the Torah of Golus. Vayishko Amakim is creating the Torah of Golus, the language of Golus, the language how we survive in exile. The pasuk says that eventually Yaakov decides to leave, to go. But the pasuk says that Lavan chases him. Yaakov, it's known that Yaakov is Soid Adas. So Yaakov is Tiferes. Tiferes is the middle sphere connected to Das. Even though Moshe Batzim is really the Bechina of Das. One is inside, one is the outside. But it's both the Bechina of Das. One is the Bechina of Das, one is the Chitzonis of Das. But they both represent the midas of Das awareness. Before Yaakov went to Beis Lavan, which means when Yaakov was still a Yoshev Ahalim, Yaakov was still living in a place under his father's roof, still a place of sitting and learning, or consumed in this cocoon of spirituality, not going into Charan. This revealing of Das and Torah, of this awareness and Torah of wisdom, was only in a concealed manner, which means the Torah that had to be revealed through Yaakov was not yet revealed. The wisdom that Yaakov, as the middle of that embodiment, of that quality, had to reveal something in this world. Yaakov yet wasn't revealing this Torah in the world. Yaakov was an Ishtam Yeshiv Halim. And wherever Yaakov was, he was if he did anything, it was just an extension of someone else's wants. Even if he gets the brachas or this, it's not him. It's not him being who he's supposed to be being in this world. So the Torah that he's supposed to be revealing in this world was Behelim. And the Shroshei Torah, the principles of these wisdoms that have to be revealed, was Mefurah. It was spread apart. It was because there was no revealing in this world. It means he wasn't yet revealing in this world. So where was that Torah in the Shroshei Torah? Where were these kernels of wisdom that had to be revealed? They weren't revealed by him. They were somehow hidden within the world, but not present. And in the Beis Lavan, there was a lot of Torah. There's a lot of Shosha Torah in the Beis Lavan. Beis Lavan is the place where Yaakov comes down to Charan, right? Where he's going to come down to the place of descent, going into the place of the darkness, to reveal. What is the Torah that Yaakov revealed in Beis Lavan? The Torah that the Torah describes. The Torah describes a whole story in this week's Parsha, where Yaakov is going into Mitzrayim, going down into Charan, and he's living with Lavan, and he's dealing with Lavan. All that is the Torah that had to be revealed with Lavan. Yaakov had to extricate them from the Klippus Lavan. How does he extricate those things, the Klippus Lavan, that just become Torah? Is through finding the Kedusha in that experience. And then that becomes part of the written Torah. So when Yaakov living as the Merkava, revealing the Das, being in the place of Lavan, he's able to reveal the Torah within Lavan. It was a very harsh klippa, like you see in the story. You don't have to, Lavan is a tricky guy. In Yaakov had to be there for 20 years to pull out the Torah that we have in our Chumash, the Torah that was revealed in our Chumash. Yaakov had to be there for a long time to be that Merkava, to allow for the revealing of that Torah. So now it goes back to the pasuk. The pasuk says that after Yaakov leaves Charan, and he's leaving Lavan, the pasuk says that he chases him. That Lavan goes and chases Yaakov. Why? Shemashirad is Lavan acher Yaakov who can't die initially. It's a slap shatera who. In other words,
He gets credit for that?
Wait a second. In other words, Lavan still had Torah in him. How do we know Lavan still had Torah in him? Because that's what the pasuk says. The pasuk said Lavan chased him. He talked to him. He said Agal Azeh. The whole conversation. Agal Azeh is like Boimer. I mean, there's like a lot of deep Torahs that had to be revealed. Lavan still had to. Lavan still had those Shosha Torah that had to be revealed in this world. Now, your question. He gets credit for that? So mainly you say that Yaakov gets credit for it because Yaakov is the Merkava. Yaakov gets the Merkava, so he's connected to that way of living. So by his way of living, he's actually revealing the Torah that's being revealed in this world. But Lavan's a Rasha. So how does Lavan? So Shazaysa Torah Shebeila Psuk and Nisha Daim Lavan Lavan. Mashlabir Daim Lavan. V'siv Hashem Yisbarach Kach. This is the answer. Shesiv Hashem Yisbarach Kach. Mamis, it's not so simple. Siv Hashem Yisbarach Kach. That Hashem was Masaba the Sibus. Hashem orchestrated a situation where Lavan will feel slighted, so Lavan will chase Yaakov. In other words, which means that not that Lavan did it with his Bechir. Not that Lavan said, I have Torah that has to be revealed. Yaakov, let me go deal with Yaakov, talk to him, let's make a deal, and that's going to be part of the Torah, and therefore the Torah is going to be revealed. No, Lavan didn't have that chesed. But Hashem was Masaba the Sibus, which means there seems to be two strands working here, right? There is a way that a person taps into that cosmic story, becomes a Merkava, and therefore embodies that quality, reveals the Torah that's being revealed, right? That's one way. The other way is, if you don't do it, there's going to be Anhagas HaYichud. There's a path of Yichud. There's Anhagas HaMishpat, which is like the path. The Ramchal talks about this idea of there's Anhagas HaMishpat, which is the path of Bechira. I'm going to choose the way I have to do it. But if I don't choose, it's going to have to be chosen through me, whether I choose or not. Because the end game is always going to be the same place. There's going to be a Gemar Yichud. There's going to be a point where everything's going to get to a place of Yichud. Everything's going to be, the world is going to reach its tikkun. The question is, are we going to be involved in it, or it's going to be despite our involvement? So if we get involved in the process, then it's our Bechira. That we become a Merkava, we become a perfect channel to reveal the perfection in our lives. Therefore, we become part of that, and therefore it's our Bechira. But if we don't, then the Masava Vasibus makes sure that will come out somehow. It'll be revealed, right? So that's the koyach that pushes the world forward, no matter the situation of the choice. And therefore, Bir Yaakov is a actually Nisha Zakum. Chomash it's a love of Chon Yam Exum. Mikra Hoya Kol Torah V'Isek Gat V'In Lishma Legalas HaTorah B'Chinas Charan Shomer Klippus. This is the Torah of Charan. What was Yaakov trying to do? Yaakov was trying to reveal the Torah. Yaakov Yishkol Makam Hu. Vayishkol Yesh Chavez. Ma'avnei Hamakim. From the Avnei Hamakim, what was he trying to do? He was trying to reveal the Torah that's revealed in Charan. There's a specific type of Torah that's revealed in Charan. There's the Torah that's revealed in Gula. The Torah of Eretz Yisrael, which is Yitzchak, and the Torah of Yaakov, so yes, Yaakov Beishav Yel Charan. The Torah of Yaakov, which Yaakov revealed when he went into Charan, the Torah that's revealed in Dafke and Galus. Lahavile is Galus Hakdusha, Lechoy LeTorah El Yoida, and to do it in such a wholesome way, in such a complete way, that thing that he becomes revealed in a way that it becomes completely part of the Torah. Okay.
The place of the stones was Har Maria.
Yeah, you're correct. But he's going. You're right. You're right. He's correct. He's going towards. This is the preeminent, the precursor of the event.
So do you need to connect to Har Maria, whatever that means, Ein Soif, on the Evan Shasia, in order to have the koyach to.
You could say that. You could definitely say that. The Torah says that. If you look before that, the Torah actually says that. It says the Avnei Makom is Evan Shasia man who called Am Kuloi. So you go to the Makom Akdusha, and then you can go to the Avnei Makom. You could definitely say that. It's definitely it's ice cold.
This was Lavan's Torah.
This is Yaakov's Torah.
Lavan was the instrument
to bring out the Torah. Yaakov. Yeah. No, there's no Torah of Lavan.
No.
Right. That's what I'm saying. There's no whatever. The Torah that we had, that becomes the Torah of Yoina, is Torah of Yaakov.
He was the instrument
to reveal it. Right. He created the conditioning and the Masala of the Sibbas that Yaakov should be in that situation that was allow him through originally for his Bechira, but when he left before his Bechira because it was too early. So Lavan chases him so Yaakov can reveal that Torah. Yeah, it's the Torah of Yaakov. Of course. Okay. This is one way of understanding it. But let's go a little bit deeper. So this is one way of understanding. One way of understanding it is that there is a structure, a spiritual structure, a cosmic structure. The cosmic structure has laws. However you understand this, we're not going to get into the problem. There's let's imagine there's parallel universes. There's the upper universe, which has these spiritual laws in the spiritual realm, and then there's everything Torah the Beres Bel Yoinim. That's what the Torah is talking about. It doesn't mean that there's no Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. They're actually real people. Of course, they're real people. That's the Kipshutai. That's it's Kipshutai. It's literal. But these people reflected these, so there was like a channel from up here to here. They were the conduits that represented these qualities. But then the Torah that we're talking about, sort of like the Torah El Yoina, that's the lashon of the Baal Shem, the Torah El Yoina, like the higher level of Torah, the structure, the higher structure, not the way Torah is lived in this world. The higher structure is some absolute tziruf. It's an absolute story. It's a story. This is the story. And this is the way it's lived. The story. But it's not so cautious. It's not so cautious. It's not so simple. Because let's see what the AriZal says. There's a few little oases here, but there's a big ayvik for this Ari, and then it goes further. So the Mamish at the beginning of the Torah, the first page of the Torah Ari. So AriZal says, we talked about this on Shuas quite a few times about the Eish Levana and Eish Chura, black fire and white fire. Bereshis, so the AriZal is stellt sich up. We have a chair. We have another chair. It's trying to understand the word Bereshis. The Torah starts with the word Bereshis. So the Dibra Torah, Atzilus, the reason why the Torah starts off with Bereshis with the bays, because Lo Dibra Torah Atzilus. The Torah is not talking about the Torah of the Atzilus. The Torah of the Atzilus is the Torah of Aleph. Bays already is the second letter. Ela Bebria. Al-Kei Nikra Torah is Habriya. It's the Torah of Bays. The Torah of Bays is the Torah of Bria. And why does the Torah start with a letter Bays? So the Yerushalmi says many reasons why the Torah starts with a Bays. One is bracha, etc. But one of the reasons is because it's not Muslim. It's missing. Ruach Tzvayis Enemis Aveves. That it's missing the south side, which means that it's a Torah of Chesar. There's some type of Cheser. There's some type of missing in the Bria. Shabbat Akim Lasis. The taket. The Eibusher created the word lasis means that the oil was chaser, and we have to matak in the world. We have to create a correction. Aleph, like we said before, is Rem Atzilus, which means it represents the highest level of Atzilus, which is Aleph, Atzilus. Simply, Bria starts with Beis, and Atzilus starts with an Aleph. So the Torah that's revealed is the Torah of Aleph. It's the Torah that we have is the Torah of Beis. So what's the Torah of Aleph? What's the Torah of Aleph? If you look at the next page, I don't want to get into the whole Arichas, but it's in Sefer Kutub and Tehillim. There's a shtickle Arichas, but in this right column, there's a word here from Ari that That there was the Torah that we have, the Torah that's revealed. We say Yesh Shishim Riba Oisis LaTorah. That Yisrael Yesh Shishim Oisis LaTorah. The Zar Chalosh, not in the Zar, the Zar Chalosh. Yesh Shishim Oisis LaTorah. Megal Lukas means down. Yesh Shishim Oisis LaTorah. That the 600,000 letters in Torah is not actually what we see in the Torah. That's a big argument. How do we get to 600? So you say you count the white space, you count the letters 3 times, you count the vovim of each letter. There's many different understandings how you get to that Torah. How you get to the number 630? 600,000. So the Ari says no, because it's a gnizas oyarishin. There's a gnizas of the oyarishin. The original oyarishin, niglas shlish and alien. Therefore, the third of the Torah is missing. There's a Torah the way it exists in Atzilus, in a higher abstract level, and then there's a Torah the way it's in the Bria. Now, in this, let's call it the Torah Atzilus. There's something that the Talmidei Ari, not Reb Chaim Vital, Yisrael Sarug, talk about something that's called Olam HaMalbish. The world of garments, which are unfolding, represents that there is. David Kamelach talks about it. That there is. Let's say it like this. There is the Eitz HaChaim is Eitz HaDas. Eitz HaDas Toivera. Eitz HaDas Toivera is already a duality. Toivera, 2. That's the world of Bria. So in the Agdama, the Ramban writes, it's Musa on the Zohar. The Zohar in Parshas Shiur says that the Kol Torah Kol Shmeis Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. The entire Torah is the name of Kadosh Baruch Hu. Rather, the reason why we make a Birchas HaTorah, the Gemara in Brachas says, that because it says Havagal Lokenu, Snukal Torah, Havagal Lokenu. No, that's not. What's the pasuk? That's the reason why we have to make a Birchas HaTorah. So the Balachredim on the Yerushalmi wrote a Pirush on the Yerushalmi and says, Shem Hashem Ekra Havagal Lokenu. What's that to do with Birchas HaTorah? Shem Hashem Ekra Havagal Lokenu. That's why we make a Birchas HaTorah. Exactly, Shem Hashem Ekra, because the Zohar writes Shem Hashem Ekra that Shmoi Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu, that Torah Shmoi Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu, Shem Hashem Ekra Havagal Lokenu. Therefore, you have to make a bracha. So there's an understanding of Kol Torah Kol Shmoi Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. Then there's another Lashon Zohar that says that it's the entire Torah is one Shem of Kadosh Baruch Hu. So we talked about the Sefer of before, where Shlomo Molchai talks about this idea that if you take out the matzah of the Torah, so when they ate from the tree of knowledge, the Eitz HaDas, what actually happens is it says that all the senses were involved, besides the sense of smell, but all the senses were involved. It says they heard, they touched, they tasted, right? So they saw, which means the senses were involved. The senses represent the 5, it represents the 5 Gevuras, which is the place of constriction. So because the senses, by definition, is a separating thing, by definition, the senses are there in the world to function within a world of duality. So, because when you say you see something, you're actually seeing something, eliminating the other thing you're not seeing. That's the definition of seeing, right? When I say I see something, that means I see this, I don't see that. If I hear something, when I say I hear something, I'm actually hearing one thing over the next. It's a process of elimination seeing. That's why we say a person has a sixth sense, they can see everything, or smell everything, or taste everything, right? But the definition of the senses is actually a separating thing. It actually allows you to navigate within a 3-dimensional universe, 4-dimensional universe. It allows you to touch this, feel this, smell this. Otherwise, you see everything, and it's an overload to the senses, right? So the senses actually constrict things. Because it represents the constriction, the senses represent constriction. The same thing also with the matzapach. If you take the Chaf Beis Torah, the 24 letters, the 22 letters in the Torah, and you write the word Bereshis, and continue writing the word Bereshis till Eini Kol Yisrael, theoretically, if you take out the Matzapach, which is the final mem, so not the 5 final letters, you take out the 5 final letters, you can actually read the entire Torah as one word. Correct? The reason why you cannot read the Torah as one word,
So if you do what?
you take out the Matzapach, you take out the mem, final mem, nun, tzadik, pei, chaf.
So how,
I don't know what the word means, but you can read the whole Torah from Bereshit to Eini Kol Yisrael as one word. Right?
You take out the space as well.
Take out the space. Space is not a
okay.
problem. The Ramban actually says at the beginning of Bereshis and Agdama, he says Bereshis Bar Elokim is all the names of Hashem, because he says is Beresh, Yizbara, Elokim. So these are 3 names. Beresh means Beresh, Yizbara means Baruch Shmoy, and Elokim. He says that's all you could do it. So instead of stopping the word Beresh Shis, say that's where it ends, you stop Beresh, then Yud Taf Bara, so it's Yizbara, right? So you can actually change. You don't stop the words when they finish. If you take out the white spaces and take out the 5 final letters, you actually read everything could be one. And you can actually read it as one word. You can also read it this way, that way, upward, downward, right? Mana tackle. You can read it backwards, forwards. You can read that's the whole thing of the Bible codes, whatever. It's a whole nother arichas. But this is actually a shoyish in the Rishonim. That there's a construct of the Torah that has these are the tzirufei Torah. These are the combinations. You're reading Bereshis bar lekim es shemanis haaretz. For example, there's also Nekudas, for example, right? The Tikkun Zohar says about the Nekudas is the nefesh of the guf. It gives it its life. You take away the Nekudas, then what are the Nekudas? The Nekudas are added. What if you take out the Nekudas? You can put new Nekudas. So you can actually read words differently. This is actually also a mocker from the Talmidei Ramban. Menachem Tzioni writes this, and later the Degel, other tzaddikim do this a lot. Yeah, but that comes all from Talmidei Ramban. You put different Nekudas, which means they're understanding that this is a structure of tzirufim. How many tzirufim? So there's 2 ways how to think about these tzirufim. One is that from Bereshis till Ein Kol Yisrael is one big word, and you can cut them up in different ways, or you can jumble them up into many different ways, which is trillions of different combinations. In other words, when you talk about the Torah as a template, as the uber structure of Istaka B'Raisa Bar Alma, what this means is that in the Olam HaMalbush, in this world of combinations, there's a structure that has from the word base till Ein Kol Yisrael. In this sequence, no, not in this sequence. It has all of these things. It can be folded in all different directions, right? That's the Malbush. It can be folded in different directions. You have this is the structure. This is like the meta structure, but you can pull out different words in different combinations. You can make 1,000 other different, trillion other different combinations.
How come the Matzbach can't be in there?
Because then it divides it. You can't read it as one word. You can't read it as what it ends.
It's a divisive letter.
It's a divisive letter. It represents a separation.
So malbush means a clothing or garment?
It's a garment. That's what malbush means. It's enfolded within each other.
Is each letter in each context of a different word a new interpretation of that letter? So meaning the Beis in Bereshis is connecting to one part of Beis, but then in the next word that has a Beis in it, it's entirely different.
Correct. Again, it can be read in different ways.
So it's each permutation.
The permutation. That's the tziruf. If you look at the Baal Shem Tov in Bereshis, so Bereshis Gebaltim Rav Mechiach Shalom B'Shem Baal Shem Tov Rav Mechiach, who were just next to the Toldos. These are Mamish Tzaddikim that were there this week. Rav Mechiach. He said the name Baal Shem. He's buried together with the Toldos in Pulmoy. That Mashiach will able to do all the tzirufim from the entire Torah. He was able to elevate all the tzirufim into one thing, and he could do all this type of tzirufim. Okay, now let's go to the Zayis HaBracha. This we have to really understand this Torah well, and then come back to where we're holding it. So it comes along the Baal Shem and says like this.
So you're saying that the Olam HaMalbush is pre-Bria?
It's pre-Bria, of course. Yeah, it's higher than Torah Atzilus. It's higher than Atzilus. It's the Makar of Atzilus.
It's not infinite?
No. No. The answer is almost infinite, right? Because it still has a certain amount of numbers.
We have to go to the end of the Torah.
Well,
we're just at the beginning. Right?
That was the Bereshit. Now we'll go to the Zayis HaBracha. You'll see what the Baal Shem says. Let's read this Torah. We'll see what he says. Vayam Sham Avram. Vayam Sham Moshe Eved Avram. Eved Hashem. Moshe Eved Hashem. Yeah. The Pasuk says Moshe Rabbeinu was writing. Moshe writes that Vayam Sham Moshe died. So what does it mean? That Moshe wrote up until this point, and from this place forward, he wrote B'dima with tears. This is the Gemara says. The Gemara in the end of the first parak of Baba Basra talks about who wrote the Torah, who wrote different, who wrote Yirmiyah, who wrote different Torah, different things. It talks about it. In L'chayim, Amar Kodesh Ela Ein Lo Shachar. L'chayim, it doesn't make any sense. Why? In Rashi Makshe Pshitas Efshe Moshe Mes. Is it possible that Moshe died and he's writing that Moshe died? He It can't be that he's alive and he's writing Moshe died, because that's just a lie, right? He said, Moshe wrote it, then he's alive, then it's alive. Imke Kasha, my Rashi. What does Rashi answer? Moshe called with Dima. Moshe wrote it with tears. The question is not how Moshe, existentially wrote that he died. And the answer is, he was crying. The question is, how could he write it? How could he write that he died if he didn't die? Because he died with tears, therefore it's okay. So he's a liar that was crying. The question is, how can Moshe write that he died when he's alive? The Torah is Kadmon Loyal, which means the Torah represents a uber structure, superstructure that supersedes creation. Right? Incidentally, that's why there's no reason for mitzvahs. You understand? That's the oimik, why there can't be a reason for a mitzvah. Reason by definition means that there's already there's a priori, there's something already in existence that dictates why it should be. If I say this should be because of that, it means that existed before that, right? But there's no before that. That's why mitzvah in its ultimate pure conception is all a chayk. If you say a reason for a mitzvah, you're already establishing that the world precedes Torah. But if the Torah precedes world, means it creates reality, then there's no reason for it.
What if the Torah gives you a reason?
So the Torah creates the reason. The Torah simultaneously created the reason. The Torah created the world, it gives it the reason.
That would be the source of the reason.
Yeah, it's the source of the reason. If I say I need to do this because of that, that means the because is already before I need to do it.
It's telling you reason to do
No,
it.
but that's the reason. That's a super. That's the Alpayim Shana Kadam Torah Learn. That's like the pre-creation reason. We have to understand what that means. But we're saying that ultimately it has to be a chayk, because if it's not a chayk, that means creation supersedes the cause. Because if I say you need to do this because, that means the because was there before I tell you need to do that, right? So therefore, I can't say that the mitzvah has a reason. That's the oimik. You must understand that there can't be a reason for a mitzvah. It cannot. Otherwise, it's not Torah.
So when we're doing a mitzvah beyond reason, just inside chok, we're tapping into that
Correct.
fullness of it.
Correct. We're correct. That's why it's atzmius.
That's
The Atzilus and the chok. Exactly.
How long has it been existed that we know?
A reason?
Torah?
The Torah that we have? What do you mean?
Based on what?
You were asking a Torah Messina? You're asking a Shana about Torah Messina? Yeah, it's another shmooze. We'll have it together quietly. That's not a conversation.
No, we're discussing that something existed because if we say that it existed, it has to be something that didn't exist before. But when do we have
A conception that it doesn't exist, or that it does exist before?
that it didn't exist before?
No, but what if you're saying that it happened at a particular time? Saying Avram lived, yeah?
Something happened. Okay, but when do we can we point to a time frame that, like, when did it say that it existed and something that didn't exist before? Or we just say this is the way it was?
I know. No, we do say that, but you're also saying that part of the Torah is a story of something that happened in a particular time period.
But for us.
Oh yeah, for us, yes, of course, for us. I'm saying, but if we pull ourselves out of our narrative,
We have to believe that something happened.
yeah, but the question is not that something happened. The question is, so what happened? Who cares? So there's a guy, Avram, he lived. So what?
No,
What
but
is-
we say the mitzvahs existed because we have to eliminate something else. If something said that you have to do something,
Yeah.
mitzvah existed because you have to eliminate something that didn't happen. I mean, mitzvah existed because something is there because something else is not there. Because that's what a mitzvah is, right? If mitzvahs are existed because there's nothing else before, but when did this happen?
that's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's what
This is
it's
exactly what we're talking about.
At what point?
There is no point. It always is. It's infinite. That's the point. That's exactly what
So
we're
that
saying.
was the believing part comes in.
Experiential, not Amunah. Whatever you experience about Baal Shem Tov, that's what it means. Is it Amunah?
Oh my God.
That's it. It's experience, not Amunah. Amunah. So piti yam l'chol davar. You have to experience. Okay. So now that Vimke Kosher, if you say if you say that the Torah is eternal, so what does the Torah talk about B'riyas Olam? The Torah is talking about events. What does it mean that the Torah supersedes creation when it's actually talking about creation stories? Misa says came because Chet Adam Rishon. That's what the Torah tells us. Vim lo Adam Rishon Chet lo Misa. Zaydu Shemachir Nitul Adam. Vim Kain Hech Nichta B'Torah Ma'azim Kedem Yom Mizgul Yom Pliny. So then what does the Torah say? Yom Pliny. If you say that the Torah starts off that that Adam Chava did Aver because they did Aver they don't Misa. But the Torah talks. But Yom Pliny said before already, right? It's Kadmon Loylam. So what's Pshat? Or Adam Kiyamas Baal. This is even a bigger shot. It's a mitzvah. Adam Kiyamas Baal. So the person died in the oil. So it means that death is in existence. Is death something that was created by man, or it's always eternal? That's part of the creation, that there's death. So what does it mean? This is what the Baal Shem wants to say. When we talk about the creation of the Torah, or the kadmus of Torah, there was this super code that contains all these possible tzirufim. Anytime something happened in this world, when Adam and Chava were created, that formation that existed in this code level, now we're drawn down and said Adam and Chava were created and born. When there was a death, the tziruf of those oisius, the combination of those letters, were brought down to say this person lived, this person died. But if he would do something else, it would have been a different tziruf.
So this also goes back to the Malachim and like the Torah that they would have had. If
Yeah.
they
Well,
wrote down.
one second. Let's go. Let's just finish what we're trying to say. Nipsek moy kashe is misas anum. Parshas Torah klub mit sifra is min otay zol rezo. Like why is called my safra? Rak min yom shom is an exile. Dain lo safra is tavis. In other words, up until Moshe's death, those passages, those psukim, post Moshe's dying, there was no yet combination of them. There was no yet perfect tziruf that says Vayom shom Moshe Eved Avram. Didn't say that. It was kasev bedima. What's bedima? Bedima means bilbul.
The gross is
The gross is the same word. Yes.
The same words?
Same letters.
Same letters.
No, not same words. Same letters.
Same letters, not in that formation.
Not in that
They
formation.
weren't organized at all.
Those
right?
psukim were there in another context?
Correct.
In another
Yes,
form.
correct. In another form. In other words, let's say there's 100 letters. Those 100 letters were there in some type of tzip. What happened then?
So it could have been something else?
Yes, that's what he said. Moshe Kasav B'Dimah, which means Moshe, he wasn't lying. He wrote those letters. Dima Lashon Taruvas Ki Yidua. Kamay Hamadama, Trumas Midamas. Hashem said this letter. Guess gave him the letters, the Taruvas. And Moshe wrote the Oisius.
So
After
he wrote it, but it wasn't.
he just wrote the letters. Aleph,
the
Aleph,
order, but it was,
Not the
it
order.
must be written.
not read it, not order.
The letters were there.
Yes. Vayomas Moshe, Vayomas, Vav, Yud, Mem, Tav. Okay? Hashem told him Mem, Tav, Yud, Vav. Okay. Then told him the next person. He gave him a list of stranded letters, which means like this. I have to get to the Oimek of this shot. What is he saying? Saying is, let's go back to, if we understand it in the Nefesh Adam, it's much more easier, then we can like pull it back. In your life. Okay, it's hard to understand it because when you're very young, you don't have these potentials. You don't have the b'chir to do this. But let's say, assuming that you have b'chir, right? Let's say you're painting a painting, for example. So the first layer of paint, I don't know if it's a good example, but the first layer of that you put down is going to be the foundation of everything that you're building on. You have choice how you're going to put what colors you're going to put on the page. But once you put down the foundational colors, everything will arise from that foundation. Okay? So like this. There were people like Moshe, Avraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, all these, the archetypes of the Torah. Everybody, the villains included, they had b'chira. They were boicher to live a certain lifestyle. The ones that were the Merkava, for the most part, they created the exact story from this infinite, or we call it infinite, this infinite tzirufim. They drew down the story that's going to be now the effects, the mais avis, that's going to be a similar bonnet for the future. The same thing also works with the villains, the people that are doing things oppositely. They will go back to the original teaching of the Baal Shem. It's Sav Vasidus. Hashem wanted that there should be a character level. Why? Now, Lavan has some level of b'chira on some level to say, I don't want to live that life. I would rather live a different life. I would rather be known as someone else, as a good guy in this story. That could have been his bechira. And if he would have done that bechira, he would have drew down a different siruf into the Oasis HaTorah. Then the effects of that story would be different to us. In other words, Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge. Because Adam and Chava ate from the tree of knowledge, they created that siruf in the Torah. Because they created that siruf, because of their bechira, we are the adult state of their katnas, are reaping the effects of their action. But if they would have chosen in their youth to put a different trajectory, then it would never say Vayamos. And it would never say Avad Kiyamos Ba'al. That story would have created a different story. A different narrative would have been projected. Now, what does that mean in terms of the Torah, the superposition of the Torah? The superposition of the Torah is, Hashem says, these are the possibilities how the world can look. There's the redeemed world, the world that fails and comes up, the world that struggles and overcomes, the world that struggles and falls. There's like all different types of possible ways how this world can be manifest. The Maisa Avos, the people that were living in that period of time, had such a strong effect on history and on our history as Klal Yisrael, that they were like they did the wiring for us, and they created the Torah from the Torah of the Atzilus, with all the tzurufim are one. They created the Torah of the Bria, and therefore we're living in the effects of the Torah of Bria, and that's the way we connect to Hashem's Torah, and through the Torah of Bria connect Hashem to Atzilus. But had they chosen a different path, created a different type of bechira, and chosen a different way, then we would have been affected in a different way. Now, we still have the koyach somehow to undo that siruf. Now, maybe not on the level mamish of Torah, on some level, certainly on the level of tefillah. Like if there's a tzara, like the Baal Shem says, and you create a new siruf to the word ratzah, you're creating, instead of a hardship, you're creating something that's willed. So you're creating a new siruf in this world. When you're a machadish in Torah, and that goes back to what we spoke about once, that between the nuns, there's a Torah that has pe'esis, that is a very small little Torah, in the beginning, middle of Balaischa. There's a very small. Where's that Torah? So there's a Kisarachim, and the Chidar writes some Sechas Sofrim. It's brought down in the Medrash Mishlei also, that this was really a Sefer Torah Gadol, but it was Nignas. It was Nignas philosophy. What's the Sefer Torah of the Nignas? What's the Great Torah? The Great Torah is the Torah between the nuns, the Torah between the falls. That's our Torah. That's our Torah. That's the six hidden Torah. That's our story. How we live our story, if it's going to be this way or that way, is our choice, right? We create a certain structure, how we're going to live our lives, a certain foundation, right? So we'll look at the Torah. We'll say the Torah tells us this is the way. This is our effects of our ancestry. This is the effects of our history, and we are supposed to use those tools and say, how could I live best to do tikkunim for the things that were done wrong? Let's say for the chet etzadas. So I'm creating tikkunim, and how can I live my life fully in a correct manner? So this is like a template for me how to live my life, to create my own Torah, to be consistent with that Torah, but to create new particular tzuruf in my own life. And if I do this correctly, then it becomes part of Torah El Yonah. It becomes part of the Torah El Yonah. Because if I'm not a conduit, if I'm not a merkava, and I'm not a super villain, and I'm not changing the world history, then okay, of course you have your little Torah that you're writing, but it doesn't become part of the Torah, part of the collective Torah. But if your life has an impact, that it affects a larger group of Yidden, which means or it affects the future. So the Torah that you're revealing, the new tzirufim that you're creating, will have an effect for the next 1,000 years. Let's think simply. If we're learning the Torah of Baal Shem, we're learning the Torah of Ari. They were mitzaref new tzirufim, right? In their own personal life, they were creating new tzirufim of Torah, new understandings of the Torah. They took the same structure of the Torah, but they created nuance perspectives from this meta structure. They created new tzirufim, and we're still learning their Torah. And so we're living in the effects of the Maisa Avos, a similar Labanim on some level, and that's really what's some of it, what's going on. if we could say, if we don't want to, that's not what's going on.
Could you say even further that
Yeah.
when we begin to make nitzurufim, we create a new Maisa Avos for and
For our ancestors, for our children.
Yeah, for
That's
children.
not a shayla. That's not that's true. That's true. And the truth is that we have the ability to change things. You say just because your father was abusive, your mother's abusive, your grandfather was abusive, or alcoholic, whatever you say, but I'm stopping it, right? What you're doing is actually, on a genetic level, you're changing a marker. You're switching on a marker. You know that? If your father's angry, your grandfather's angry, you decide not to become angry, your kid is going to be born with the anger gene shut down. Because we can actually affect, that's the infancy. That's what we're saying is like, there's something about the beginning of things that has so much more importance, so much more value. This goes back literally almost what you said in the beginning. It's like the Torah is saying, this is the story, our beginning story. We're living only the effects of that story. Of course, we can mightily fight to undo things, and we have to undo the Chet Tzadas, and undo. We have to do that. But there's the tools that we have. The Torah says, okay, living in the effects of these things that happen, because these are the truth that were created for us. We're living on the effects of Korach's rebellion. We're living the effects of the Lavan's story. We're living the effects of the Mechava, of Noach. All these stories we're living the effects of. So these are the tools that the Torah says, okay, this is the Torah. This is the mitzvahs I'm going to give you. These are the mitzvahs that allow you to live in this world, to function in this world in a correct way, that you can able to live in a healthy and a spiritual, holy way. And then there's we talked about this many times. There's Torah's Chesed and Torah's Emes. Like the Torah's Emes is the Torah that we have to Torah Simecha, the Torah Simecha that we have to reveal in this world. That's our personal Torah.
So is it true to say that on our lower extent we're also creating our tzuruf from the
Of course.
Yeah.
That's
Not
every time we
that
daven.
extent, but-
Every time we learn. If we say a chiddush, you're creating some level of a new tziruf.
Is it the midas Shem Makom? Is that it? The specificity?
Yeah. So that's what goes back to that. So that's Yikach Mavna Makom means that what the Baal Shem is saying also that there's a particular Torah in a particular place. There's a Torah Eretz Yisrael. There's a Torah Bavel. There's a Torah America. There's a Torah New York.
Everyone.
There's a Torah every
But
place.
that's why you console someone. You say, I'm Makom Yinach Mesem, because it's impossible for me, however close, for me to fully be the source of console for your loss.
Correct.
So what would be is the
the
utmost
space.
specific cure.
Correct. It's the space that holds everything. And that's the Avnei HaMakim. We have to take from the Avnei HaMakim and we also Meir Shleisav. You have to take from the Avnei HaMakim and they're lifted to Meir Shleisav, lift it off to the Reish, to the Aleph, to lift it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. See, what is the Avnei HaMakim? What is the Geist? What is the mindset of people living in this place? And if you really understand, if you look through Shalshelis of Gedolei Yisrael, you see, okay, this is like an American Gedolei Yisrael. This is like a Russian Gedolei. You can see it. If you understand the culture, you get it. When you go back to certain places, you say, now I understand why, Chassidus came from Ukraine and Russia. I get it. It's dark there always. I understand why, there was a certain culture of like lifting out of dark. The Torah of where it's sunny on the beach is a different type of Torah. You have to find the Torah there too. It's not Makim. It's a different type of Torah.
Yeah, Mechadish whole Bereshis that you can really go back to creation and reorganize the Tzira.
Yeah.
So what the spiritual
correct? That's tefillah. That's tefillah. That is really what tefillah is. You're going back to the original tzurufim. You say these are the tzurufim. I'm recombining them in a new tzurufim that are going to make a new amshacha, a new revealing of Hashem's light in this world. So this is Torah Atzilus. Torah Atzilus is this map. So in the Kisvei, that's why it's interesting, because the Kisvei itself, Yochai Vital doesn't mention Elohim Alvish, and only Rabbi Sol Sarug, and through the Emek HaMelech, and the Alter writes in many times the Torah brings it down. It was the Yochai Vital said that only the Torah that he received from the AriZal was Emes, and he shouldn't read any other Torah. But a lot of the Italian Mukabbalim were Makabal from Yisrael Sarug. And later it became totally accepted. This is the Elohim Alvish, like the supercomputer that has all the combinations.
But then your book on Emek HaMelech is this iteration of like touching up the people that would or wouldn't learn that.
Yeah, in the beginning, you're right. Yes, I wrote about this. That's correct.
To give like a hyper simplified like scenario, if a person lived exactly to the word of the Torah without, it's not necessarily I mean, it is a great thing, but if he did without any Kedushin, without any sort of drawing, like he did everything exactly
without
how
his
it's-
nuance of his personality
Yeah,
involved.
Yeah, it's not. It's. I mean, he should be a tzaddik gomer.
He will be a tzaddik gomer. He's just not going to add to the new tziruf.
Okay.
That's the word.
Okay.
And that's a chasar.
Okay.
Every person has to add their, say, chalkeinu b'soyer secha. What's the chalkeinu? It could be a twist. It could be a nuance, how you relate
It's
to
hard
it.
to even imagine such
Correct.
a person.
Right,
who's gonna
right,
be
'cause this
so
person's
adopted to do
everything exactly,
put the
exactly.
Saira and not veer
Right,
to
right, 'cause
use
it's
his
the-
head at all.
Right, because there's always a personality
Right.
involved. Some,
Just
even a
like
person says, I'm mamish, I'm saying exactly. It's
Right.
nishamas.
Okay, hypothetical. I just-
Yeah. It's nishamas. Yeah. Especially,
Are the combinations infinite?
that's what we're saying. It's
No, but these letters, whatever the specific letters, are these infinite combinations?
Theoretically, yes. In the
Infinite.
world of infinity, in the
Why
finitude,
is
it's
it
going to
infinity if the
so what's
world
the-
is not infinite in terms of there's going
That's
to be an ichthus?
So what is the importance of having a letter to whatever is happening? Like, what's
That's what I'm saying. It's not infinite. It's not infinite mamish. It's not.
It
There's
is. No, it has to be
It's
infinite.
Ki'ilu infinite.
It's Ki'ilu infinite.
The Nakudas give.
So it gives it a trillion more combinations.
In
other words, Hashem is saying there's different possibilities how you can live your life.
Yeah.
Forget about infinity. Let's say 100. There's 100 ways how you can choose your life.
Yeah.
You choose this way, this is gonna you're living the effects of this way. You choose this way, this is gonna be the effects of this way. See, once you say the word infinity, you're right. If you say infinity, that means nothing. It means nothing technically, because then you're saying that there's no structure. We are saying that there is some type of superstructure. The structure has, let's say, 1,000. I just give you a number. Let's say it's 1,000 possibilities.
I'm not saying. So my next question is, what is the importance of having a letter to whatever is?
Now, letters. It's here. We're saying.
What is
saying
the importance of having?
So that goes back to the first part of the conversation. In other words, all the tzirufim that you're creating represents a spiritual possibility. In other words, let's say a person lives a certain way, right? Says, okay, this is what happened in my life. Avram, let's say, instead of not saying achaisi, says instead of saying saying achaisi, he doesn't say achaisi. Then the relationship of Avram with Sarah will reflect a different type of spiritual paradigm. Us living in the effect will say, okay, if I understand what the spiritual process of Avram with Sarah, without him saying achaisi, what would that represent? I can understand in my avodas Hashem, in my life, how I'm supposed to relate to my own self and to my wife. You follow? In other words, it's the combination. If I, you see, I'll give another example. If I say, here's this tziruf, could have been this way, could have been this way, could have been that way, right? If I understand, if it flowed this particular way, I say, okay, so now let me go back to its root and see how in the structure of things does this work. This combination, what does the Uber structure tell me about this combination? This structure tells me that in order for this thing to happen, these are the particular ways that it happens. Like I said, like akudim, but if he did it differently and he didn't do, let's say he didn't speckle his animals, so the avodah of tzoin, and tzoin is like a yichud shem havai, not whatever that idea of tzoin represents, will be a different variation of that. So I would say, okay, I have tzoin in my life, I have sheep, I have possessions in my life. What am I supposed to be doing? Okay, Yaakov couldn't have ruled. He didn't do that structure. He did something else, another structure, alternative structure. In my spiritual life, what could I do with my possessions? I can learn from Yaakov because he represents now that story. I can learn from his life and say, okay, he did that. And that was a positive thing. Okay, so I can learn from that. My son is in the law. I can learn from that.
But it could have very well be learned like
Different.
different way.
Correct.
Just as good or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. Yes, correct. Now, the Korach would have been a tzaddik. The story would have been different. Bill would have been a tzaddik. The story would have been different. And it would have been a different story for me and you to learn how we supposed to live our lives.
Could you say that the same point would have come out, like in Torah Yichud, like
In terms of Yichud, probably the same.
Haggis Yichud.
Yeah, and Haggis Yichud
It
probably
would have come out just in a different way.
in a different way. You say you move this direction, it goes this way. Then it goes that direction, this goes that way.
So what about if it's a finite amount of permutations, but there's an infinite amount of outcomes? That meaning, in one way, there's a finite amount of permutations,
Right.
but you can do infinity with them. There's
But
an
even infinity is not. It's not a real infinity because if I say there's, let's say, 1,000 letters, okay, I can make trillions of combinations, but it's still a number.
There are things we can learn from.